To my granddaughter Serena, I leave the entire estate, valued at $14 billion. The lawyer's voice echoed through the silent room. My parents flushed red with rage. My brother slammed his palm against the table. "Sign the release," he hissed. "Otherwise, you're sleeping on the curb tonight." I didn't flinch. No. By midnight, my clothes were already tossed onto the pavement. They thought I was shattered, but they had no idea about the small steel key tucked safely in my pocket. When they showed up the next morning to remove me from the clifftop fortress, they even brought a demolition team. But when the gates swung open, they didn't see someone defeated. They saw me standing beside the state's attorney general. And for the first time, my family tasted fear. Drop a comment and tell me where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I love seeing who's part of this community. For 25 years, I lived quietly in the shadows. I work as a restorer of rare books, my days spent inside a dim, dust-filled studio, with tweezers and archival glue, repairing the scars left by neglect and passing years. It's a craft that demands endless patience, steady fingers, and the ability to hold still while the rest of the world rushes past. It made sense, really. I spent my days mending damaged pages because I couldn't mend the damaged people waiting for me at home. My family was loud not just in volume but in presence. My father, Leonard, was a failed executive who carried his arrogance like armor, convinced the universe owed him riches he never earned. My mother, Marilyn, treated life like a staged photograph, always adjusting the angles to hide the fractures in her marriage and in herself. And my brother, Darren, was a reckless crypto speculator who viewed every relationship as a bargain to exploit. They were a tornado of ego and chaos, and I was the stillness left behind, quietly picking up the wreckage. It took me years to realize that this was the snare. It's what I call the cycle of familiar cruelty. When you're raised in a home where affection is a bargaining chip and mockery is everyone's native tongue, you don't even recognize it as abuse. You start believing it's simply your responsibility to endure it. I convinced myself that if I stayed quiet enough, useful enough, small enough, I could somehow stitch the broken spine of this family back together. I mistook survival for virtue. I didn't realize I was slowly suffocating. The only time I could breathe was on Sundays. Every week at exactly 1 o'clock, I drove to the cliffside fortress. My family despised visiting grandfather Walter. They called it paying the entrance fee to stay in his will. They'd lounge in his parlor, checking their watches, chatting about market swings and golf memberships, impatient for him to die. But I always went straight to the library. Walter wasn't just a tech titan to me. He was the only person alive who understood the power of silence. We never talked about wealth. We talked about history, about preservation. He'd watch me repair a crumbling first edition, his eyes sharp with recognition. "Serena," he'd say, "you have the precision of a surgeon and the spirit of a fighter. Don't let them tell you your quiet is weakness. It's preparation." Back then, I thought he was just being kind to the granddaughter who didn't belong at the dinner table. I didn't realize he was teaching me. He wasn't just observing my work, he was observing how I endured. He saw the way my mother belittled my dust-covered pastime. He noticed how my father brushed aside my opinions like crumbs on a tablecloth. He watched my brother Darren borrow money I didn't have, fully expecting I'd never ask for it back. Walter saw everything. And while I was desperately trying to patch the unraveling seams of my family, he was quietly constructing a fortress around me. He knew I wouldn't walk away until I had no other choice. So he waited. He let me act as the family's fixer until the day he died, because he knew his death would be the final strike that severed my loyalty. He didn't leave me wealth to pamper me. He left me wealth to equip me. The call came on a Tuesday night. A massive heart attack. Swift. Almost gentle. The doctor said Walter was gone before he hit the library floor. I didn't cry immediately. Instead, a cold kind of static filled me, like the last lamp in a blackened room had just gone out. But my family? They didn't freeze. They activated. The funeral was a farce, not a memorial, a business mixer. My father, Leonard, stood by the casket, shaking hands with board members, his eyes dry and calculating, scanning the room for an audience to his performance of grief. He wasn't mourning a father. He was auditioning for the title of patriarch. My mother, Marilyn, treated the funeral like it was a fashion gala, wearing a dramatic custom veil and lifting a lace handkerchief to her completely dry eyes whenever a camera drifted her way. And Darren spent the entire service glued to his phone, scrolling and smirking, as if death were nothing more than an interruption to his plans. Standing alone at the back, I realized I couldn't stand to be near their theatrics. I watched them stage their grief like a cheap performance, and in that moment, I finally understood what Walter had been trying to tell me for years. They didn't love him. They loved his resources. They were vultures circling a body that hadn't even cooled. I slipped out before the reception began. I couldn't bear the thought of watching them sip vintage wine and raise toasts to a legacy they contributed nothing to. The will reading took place 2 days later. The conference room at the law firm was cold, bright, and smelled faintly of lemon polish and quiet greed. Mr. Caldwell, Walter's longtime friend and attorney, sat at the head of the mahogany table. He had eyes like sharpened steel. My family swept into the room, claiming the best chairs as if they were arriving to collect trophies. Leonard leaned back, loosening his suit jacket. "Let's move this along, Caldwell," he muttered. "We have a company to run." Mr. Caldwell didn't bother to respond with a smile. He opened a thick leather binder and began. "To my son, Leonard, I leave nothing. To my daughter-in-law, Marilyn, nothing. To my grandson, Darren, nothing." The silence that followed was suffocating, a vacuum swallowing whatever breath they had left. Then he continued. "To my granddaughter, Serena, I leave the entire estate, financial assets, real estate holdings, and full controlling interest in Carter Industries. Estimated total value, $14 billion. For a heartbeat, no one reacted. Then the room detonated. My father shot to his feet, his face flushing an ugly shade of crimson. "This is absurd," he roared. He wasn't in his right mind. "She manipulated him." My mother grabbed her pearls, this time genuinely panicked, gasping as though the air had turned toxic. Darren slammed his fist on the table, shattering his water glass. $14 billion? For her? She repairs old books. She doesn't know anything about business. Mr. Caldwell simply lifted a hand. "Enough. The will is airtight. Walter completed 3 separate competency evaluations. There is no legal challenge." Mr. Caldwell said calmly. Leonard stared at me. There was nothing fatherly left in his expression, only calculation. He inhaled slowly, straightened his tie, and lowered himself back into his chair. Then he slid a sheet of paper across the table toward me. "A pre-drafted legal agreement. Listen to me, Serena," he said, slipping into that condescending tone he'd used my entire childhood. "We all understand this was an error. You're not built for this kind of responsibility. You're quiet. You're delicate." He tapped the paper. "So here's what we're offering. Sign this waiver. Transfer the entire estate to me. In return, we'll establish a trust for you. $1 billion. A lifetime allowance. You can go back to your antique books and never worry about anything again." I stared at the page. $1 billion to vanish. To surrender. To let them win. I looked at my father, then at Marilyn, who was eagerly nodding, and finally at Darren, who wore a smug twist of satisfaction. They didn't see me as family. To them, I was a blockade. I didn't reach for the pen. I met Leonard's eyes. "No." The word cracked through the room like a snapped wire. His face shifted into something cold and monstrous. "No?" he breathed. "No," I repeated. "I'm not signing." His voice dropped to a venomous whisper. "Then you're finished. If you walk out of here with that inheritance, you are no longer my daughter. You become my enemy, and I will ruin you." I pushed back my chair and stood. Then I walked toward the door. I didn't look back. That was the moment the war officially started. I drove straight home. I needed to pack. I needed to think. But when I slipped my key into the lock, it wouldn't turn. I tried again, assuming it was stuck. Then I saw the paper taped to the door. "Property seized by management." My phone vibrated. A message from my landlord, the same man who played golf with my father every Sunday. "Sorry, Serena," Leonard called. "Says there are issues with the lease guarantee. I have to lock the unit until it's sorted." They hadn't just evicted me. They had erased me. My clothes, my tools, my half-finished restoration pieces, my entire life sat behind that door while I stood in a humming fluorescent hallway realizing exactly what was happening. This was their tactic. Shock and overwhelm. Strip me of shelter. Strip me of resources. Wait for me to crawl back. Begging for their mercy. They expected tears. They expected desperation. They expected me to fold. I didn't call any of them. I walked to my car. All I had was my purse, my phone, and the clothes I was wearing. And in the glove compartment, I had the heavy steel key Walter had pressed into my hand 6 months earlier. "For a stormy day," he'd said. It wasn't raining. It was a full-blown hurricane. The engine hummed as I pulled away, putting distance between me and the wreckage of the life I'd known. I drove east toward the ocean, toward Newport. The cliffside citadel was more than a residence. It was a fortress carved into a ridge of black stone, reachable only by a long, narrow causeway. As my car rattled over the uneven stones, waves exploded against the cliffs, throwing white spray into the air. The gates towered above me, iron giants that looked untouched for a century. I rolled down my window. Before I could type the code into the keypad, a voice crackled through the speaker. "State your identity." "Serena," I said. "Walter's granddaughter." The iron beasts groaned. Slowly, reluctantly, they opened. I followed the gravel path, the stones crunching beneath the tires as the mansion rose ahead of me. Dark stone, gray sky, silent and imposing. It didn't look inviting. It looked unassailable. I parked in the courtyard. As I stepped out, the front door opened. A man emerged, broad-shouldered, towering, wearing a dark suit that barely masked the military discipline in his stance. This was Marcus, head of security, former Navy SEAL. Walter had told me about him, his loyalty, his precision. "Miss Serena," he said, his voice low and gravelly. He didn't question my arrival. He didn't ask about luggage. He simply stepped aside and held the door open. "We've been expecting you." I walked inside. The great hall was just as I remembered: vaulted ceilings, stone floors, the faint smell of wood smoke and ancient paper. But it felt different now. It didn't feel like a place I visited. It felt like oxygen after years of living breathless. A few staff members emerged from the dim hallways, the core team, Walter's chosen people. They nodded in silent acknowledgement. There was no pity in their eyes. They looked at me like a captain finally stepping onto her own deck. I went straight to the library, my sanctuary. Books lined the walls from floor to ceiling, the scent of leather and dust curling around me like a familiar embrace. I settled into Walter's chair. And that's when the truth hit me, not grief, but clarity. I looked at the fortress he'd built. I thought of the apartment I was barred from. I thought of the family who discarded me the second I stopped being useful. And I understood something chilling. If Walter hadn't done this, if he hadn't given me this home, this power, this protection, I would have vanished. Completely. My family would have ground me down to nothing. They would have married me off to some convenient business ally or kept me as a silent, decorative hostage, scraping away every real part of me until I existed only as a mirror of their demands. A world without Walter wasn't just emptier. It was a world where I never would have made it out alive. He didn't just secure my future. He saved my existence. He saved me. Marcus appeared in the doorway. "We've locked down the perimeter," he said. "The causeway gate is reinforced. No one enters unless you approve." I looked up at him. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the one patching the wreckage. I was the one being shielded. "Thank you, Marcus," I said. "Your father has called the main line 6 times, he added. "He's shouting." "Let him," I said. "He can't reach us from here." I closed my eyes. Outside, the ocean pounded the cliffs. Inside, the silence wrapped around me like armor. I was homeless, disowned, under attack. And yet, in that chair, clutching the armrests, something unfamiliar rose inside me. Not fear, but the cold, anchoring weight of power. I was safe. And tomorrow, I'd be dangerous. The quiet didn't last. The next morning, the digital assault began. I tried to buy coffee in the village market. My card declined. Insufficient funds. I tried another. Account frozen. I checked my banking app. Locked. Then a court alert flashed across my screen. Leonard had filed an emergency petition for temporary guardianship, claiming I was suffering from grief-induced psychosis and incapable of handling my own affairs. They weren't just after the money. They were coming for my mind. They wanted the legal right to silence me forever. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I drove straight back to the Citadel, walked into the library, and sat across from Mr. Caldwell. "They froze my accounts," I said, sliding my phone across the desk. He didn't look up. "Predictable. They're trying to starve you out. Classic siege maneuver." Then he slid a matte black card toward me. "But they overlooked one detail. You're not using your funds anymore. You're drawing from the estate. And that account? Unlimited." The library transformed into a war room. Estate maps spread across the table. Legal briefs stacked high. Marcus monitored the perimeter from the windows. "Mr. Caldwell highlighted sections of the trust. I wasn't restoring old books anymore. I was learning the blueprint of my defense. The guardianship petition is nasty," Caldwell muttered. "They're claiming you have a history of instability. They're twisting your quiet into diagnostic symptoms." "Let them," I said, voice like ice. "I'll pass every evaluation. But I'm not returning their calls." And I didn't. My phone vibrated nonstop. 47 missed calls from my mother, 30 from Darren, 12 from my father. The voicemails swung between syrupy concern. "We just want to help you. Honey," and venomous threats. "You're going to rot in a facility." I deleted all of them. I was ghosting my own abusers. 3 days later, the war didn't knock. It arrived. A low tremor shook the coffee in my cup. Not the ocean. Engines, heavy diesel. "Marcus," I said. "I see it," he answered, hand already on his radio. I stepped to the surveillance monitors. A full convoy rolled down the causeway. Leonard's luxury SUV in front. Behind it, 2 massive yellow bulldozers and a crew of contractors in orange vests. They halted at the iron gates. Leonard leapt from his SUV, waving paperwork wildly, probably forged deeds or fake permits. He barked at the foreman, jabbing a finger at the mansion like he owned it. "What are they doing?" I asked. "They're not here for a visit," Marcus said, jaw rigid. "They're here to break in." I pressed the intercom button. The audio crackled through the library. "Right to enter." Leonard was screaming at the foreman. "I'm the executor. That girl is a squatter, mentally unstable. Break the gate down." "Sir," the foreman stammered, "this is a historic structure. Without a court order—" "I am the court order," Leonard roared. "I pay you. Break it down. We're gutting the place anyway." Gutting it. They weren't just coming to evict me. They were coming to annihilate the Citadel, Walter's legacy, strip it, sell it, erase it. Marilyn stepped from the car, annoyed at the delay. Darren filmed the scene, no doubt for some flashy, massive renovation video to hype his next crypto scam. "Marcus," I said quietly, "are the gates secure?" "They're reinforced steel," Marcus replied. "But a bulldozer will break through eventually." On the screen, the first bulldozer revved. Thick black smoke curled into the air. The foreman gave the signal. The blade lifted. They were actually going to do it. Leonard stared into the camera, his expression a twisted blend of terror and victory. "Open up, Serena," his voice blared over the speaker. Or, "We're coming in." I looked at Mr. Caldwell. He wasn't panicking. He was checking the time. "It's time," he murmured. I watched the bulldozer inch forward, metal grinding against metal. "Open the gate," I said. Marcus froze. "Miss Serena." "Open it," I repeated. "Let them in." Because they thought they were storming a house. They didn't realize they were marching into a trap. The heavy iron gates groaned open, the engines whining as they pulled back. The bulldozers idled. Leonard didn't wait. He strode through the entrance like a general entering conquered territory. My mother stepped forward next, sliding her sunglasses up her nose as if she were already planning where the new drapes would hang. And right behind her came Damon live streaming their little victory parade like it was a festival instead of a felony. They thought they'd find me shaking on the steps. They expected defeat. Instead, they walked straight into judgment. From the top of the stone stairs, everything was in full view. To my left stood Mr. Rowan. To my right, Marcus. But it was the man standing beside Marcus who froze my father mid-stride. A pinstripe suit, arms crossed, a gold insignia gleaming on his lapel. State Attorney General Adrian Hale. The contractors behind my father hesitated. Engines died one by one. The foreman stared at Hale, then at my father, and instantly shut off the bulldozer. The silence dropped like a curtain. "What is this?" Victor barked, but his voice cracked. "Move. I'm reclaiming my property." "No, you're not," Mr. Rowan said. His tone was quiet but sharp like a verdict. He raised a tablet. "You're being live broadcast to the state police servers, Victor. And the thousands watching Damon's live stream just watched you order the demolition of a protected landmark." Damon lowered his phone slowly, his face turning paper pale. "I built all this," Victor screamed, pointing to the SUV. "I am Vance Holdings." "Actually," I said, calm as a surgeon. "You're not." Mr. Rowan stepped forward, reading directly from the document. Clause 4. Section B of the Elias Vance Trust. Upon his death, controlling interest 51% of all voting shares passes not to the board, but to the heir of Cliffwatch Estate. I descended one step, meeting my father's eyes. "I own 51% of your company, Dad. I'm the majority shareholder. I'm the board." The truth landed like a punch. He staggered back, breathless. "You can't," he choked. "I can," I said. "And as majority shareholder, I am terminating you as CEO for gross misconduct. Effective immediately. You're trespassing with company equipment to commit a felony." "You can't fire me," he shrieked. "I'm Victor Vance. I am everything." "No," I said softly. "This is what they call the empty wallet illusion." My father had never built a character, just a costume made of wealth. Without the money, the costume dissolved. The police stepped forward. They bypassed him, heading straight for Damon. "Wait, hey, I didn't do anything," Damon yelped as they cuffed him. "You're on video kicking the gate," the officer replied. My mother's mask shattered. Her glamour melted into desperate panic. She turned to me with a trembling smile. "Alina, sweetheart, please, this is all a misunderstanding. We're family. We love you." I stared at the woman who watched me lose my home and said nothing. "Get off my property." I turned and walked inside. Behind me, handcuffs snapped shut and my father began to sob. I didn't look back. The war was over. The police lights faded down the causeway, leaving the courtyard swallowed in darkness. I stood still, breathing in the salt-heavy air. It didn't smell like danger anymore. It smelled like triumph. The aftermath was merciless. My father wasn't just fired, he was erased. The Vance Holdings board reviewed the footage and voted unanimously to remove him before dawn. I didn't even need to cast my controlling vote. My mother was quietly exiled from every gala, club, and charity she clung to. It turned out reputation evaporates as fast as money. Damon pled guilty to avoid jail time, but his online empire collapsed overnight. They tried to reach me legal letters, emotional essays, desperate apologies. I didn't read any of them. I didn't delete them either. I simply filed them under archive cases and moved on. Because I had work to do. Cliffwatch didn't remain a fortress. I turned it into a refuge. Using Elias's $5 billion legacy trust, we opened the Elias Vance Institute for Preservation and Arts. The ballroom where empty parties were once held now echoed with students learning restoration, design, and bookbinding. I still spend my days in the library, but never alone. Mr. Rowan visits for chess on Thursdays. Marcus teaches defense on the lawn. We eat together in the kitchen, not as staff and employer, but as chosen family. Yesterday, I opened the final letter Elias left in the safe. The ink was faded, but the message was sharp. My dearest Alina, you wondered why I didn't intervene sooner. I needed you to see who they were. I needed you to know that you could stand without them. You were never the spare plan. You were the only plan. The loud destroy. The quiet rebuild. Build something beautiful. I placed the letter inside the first book I ever restored. I looked out at the cliffs that guarded us for generations. I wasn't just the keeper of Cliffwatch anymore. I was its architect. There are broken things in the world waiting to be mended. And now, for the first time, I have every tool and all the time I need. Sometimes the family you choose is stronger than the one you're born into. And if you've ever had to carve out your own piece, just know it's not only possible, it's yours to claim.